viewers, my name's Cara. I'm your host for Tuesdays here on the Pagan Perspective, or Wednesdays depending on your time zone. And this week we are talking about coping with the issues of our times. I'm sure you can potentially already hear the ice cream truck in the background because, again, apparently that's what happens in my neighborhood on Tuesdays, like I was mentioning last time. And again, I was going to record this video out in the backyard, but my neighbors are out there, and I'm still a little bit weird about, just talk about magic and paganism, 10 feet away from where my neighbors who don't know that I'm a witch can clearly hear everything I'm saying. Sometimes I record out there, even though they might come in and out of their house or whatever, but they're in their backyard right now, reading a book and relaxing. So I'm in my enclosed porch. It's a little warm out here, but it's a nice day and I'm thankful for that. So this week's topic, coping with these times. This was actually a collaborative effort in coming up with this week's topic from the team. I had mentioned, some people are going back to school at this time. Maybe we could talk about something related to that. And then someone else said, can we talk about specifically feelings of isolation and loneliness at this time and coping with that, because a lot of people are dealing with that. And I wasn't really sure at first, are those separate topics or can we put them together? So we're focusing on the coping with feelings of isolation and loneliness, but as you'll see, the topic text will be below and I'll read it here for you in a second. We're also addressing what is going on right now for a lot of people, or what would be normally going on for a lot of people and maybe isn't happening in a normal way right now. I know in the past we've talked about how do I practice while in college or at university in a dorm where there are rules about what kind of things I can have and stuff like that, but this back to school season is very different than the back to school seasons where those are the foremost question on people's mind. The world is different now. So I'm going to go ahead and read you the topic now. It says, in a world without a pandemic, I wrote this and I didn't even think about that when I was writing it. In a world without a pandemic, many people would be going back to school around this time, both students and teachers. Some may be going back to school physically, others online, and any option provides its own stresses and new challenges at this time. Do you have any strategies or specific spiritual practices that you could share for coping with feelings of isolation and loneliness? What about for stress in general, or more specific to our current circumstances? So first of all, I want to say that as much as at some points in my life I kind of miss being in school because I miss having a certain schedule, I miss feeling like I always know what I have to do because it's just outlined for me, rather than choosing what I do every day on my own, working for myself as I do, and thinking about how, especially with college, I miss living with my friends and having them all around. As much as I miss those things and sometimes get nostalgic about those things, I feel very grateful right now that I am not in a position where I have to think about going back to a school environment, either as a student or as a teacher. My partner used to be a teacher. I have many friends who are teachers or used to be teachers, and hearing from people right now, both students and teachers who are sharing online the situations going on at their schools, whether they're going back physically or they're trying to transition to online work, and maybe that's completely different for them too. I am grateful to not have to be part of that process. I do not envy them one bit right now, because it is a huge source of stress and frustration, even for those of us who are just worried about how it's affecting other people. I literally cannot truly know what it feels like to be in the position of having to go back right now with things the way they are, especially in my country, in the United States. Things are not doing great here with the pandemic. I won't dwell on that kind of stuff for too much in this video because I know it's a lot, but it just, I am very worried for people who are having to go back to school physically at this time. I am grateful that there is an option in technology for people to be able to do things online. However, I've also been talking to friends of mine who are teachers who are having to transition to online learning when that's not maybe what they signed up to do as a teacher. Maybe it's not what they were trained to do and they're having to learn how to use these things. It's not what their students signed up for. Not everyone is equipped to be able to take a class online with regular meetings or even with meeting every day. And, if they had signed up for an in-person class, maybe people can go to a classroom and sit down with a book and a pen and paper, but they don't have internet at home or they don't have a home computer. It's not something that is easily transferable for everyone. So I'm learning a lot about how different people are kind of being affected by this. And I am just in the position of, for the people that I know, asking them if they want to talk about it, if it would help them to talk about it. I'm happy to listen and being that sounding board for people and validating their worries and concerns and anxieties about it. And that's maybe the most practical thing that I've been doing, other than, there have been some petitions, there have been some email or letter writing campaigns, email the school board to share our concern about our students going back to school at this time, and teachers as well, in places where they're being expected to do so physically. So I've sent the emails, things like that. So there are definitely practical things that I've done. But this is Pagan Perspective, and so what we often talk about here is what are we doing sort of spiritually or magically, right? So I do feel like it is important to also complement those things that we're doing with real life, mundane, we would call it, I guess, strategies, non-magical strategies. So for example, when we do a spell to help us get a job, we also go out and fill out the job applications, right? The spell doesn't fill out the applications for us and make sure that everyone knows who we are and that we're looking for a job. It's helping us along the way, boosting that practical, I guess is another word we could use, that practical thing that we're doing of filling out the job application, right? So that's kind of what I mean here. So if we can do magic to protect protesters and similar things like that, then we can also do magic to protect teachers and students. I'm not saying literally I'm going to do this spell and that means they will never get the virus and they won't have to wear a mask and they won't have to worry about anything. That's not what I mean. By protect in this case, I mean more helping people cope with the anxiety and the stress of this time, which is something that I know I use spiritual related practices for quite a bit. Things like grounding, things like meditations or visualizations where we ground into our senses, taking time out to breathe in those moments that are really difficult, making sure that there is time to ourselves, focusing on when we get into our brain a lot, which people say this about me a lot, that I'm really up in my brain a lot of the time. When we're getting really caught up in thoughts and worries and anxieties, especially, taking time to sit and examine what's physically going on around us with whatever senses we have at our disposal. So if we are sighted, looking at what do I actually see? What can I see around me that is really there in this reality? What can I hear if I am a hearing person? I am. If we are hearing people, what can we hear? What do we smell? What can we taste? What can we touch? So it is dependent on the senses that each person has at their disposal. But taking time out to use those sort of physical senses, whichever ones we have access to ground ourselves in the physical reality, in the physical realm, and kind of get out of our head a little bit. So I do that a lot. I actually, this past week, spent a lot of time. I have little camping chairs here on my enclosed porch that I sit in because we don't have outdoor furniture. So I'll take one of my little camping chairs out into my yard and I'll just sit there. No phone, no book. I mean, sometimes I take a book out there and read, but when I'm doing it specifically to kind of help myself deal with some stress or anxiety, I go out, I sit there, and I feel the sun on my skin, I feel the breeze, I feel the grass under my feet, I hear the birds, I hear the squirrels, I look, I see the trees, I see the squirrels hopping around from the fence to the tree, I see the birds, and I'm focusing on these things in a way that sort of says to me, this is what is real around me right now. And this is what matters in the present moment. So the idea of being present is something that, or the idea of mindfulness, which is not a purely witchy concept. This is a thing that far more people than just witches or pagans make use of this. But this idea of being present in the moment rather than worrying about what might happen or what has happened. It doesn't solve everything all the time, but I think it's important, and it has been helpful for me personally to take little time out moments for that kind of thing. Strategies or specific spiritual practices for coping with feelings of isolation and loneliness. The biggest thing for me for dealing with feelings of isolation and loneliness has not been magical in the sense of like a spiritual practice that I do. It has been technology. It has been, if anything, magical community, having people to talk to. That's been the biggest thing for me. Like for me, being alone is not that strange of a thing. I have always enjoyed being alone, having alone time. Even when I was a kid, I would go off and play alone in the woods, in the yard, whatever, go for walks alone at a park. And now I live with my partner, so that's very helpful. Previously, I lived alone. But there is definitely, for me, a feeling of being alone, or even my partner and I talk about sometimes even together, we feel alone together, like we're alone on our own little island, just the two of us, and sometimes in a way that feels very isolating, that we feel like there's no one else for us to reach out to, because we can't always just be the only support that the other has. So the big thing for me has been making sure that I have other people to reach out to and talk to. So a lot has been pagan and witchy friends that I've met through YouTube over the years, who I chat with on a pretty regular basis. Even if we go sometime without chatting, then we catch back up and, how are you doing? We check in with each other and things like this. And my friends at the Buckland Museum, for the first couple of weeks of quarantine, were the only people calling and checking up on my partner and I, because they were worried about how we were doing. And then we also, spent some time listening to how they were doing. And again, just kind of being there for people as a sounding board, especially if they are people who, like me, are verbal processors, where we really feel like we process stressful things through talking about them. And that can also be, verbal processing sometimes could also be writing it down. So if you are a fan of journaling, or even if you're not a fan of journaling, but maybe you know that verbal processing is a thing that's easy for you or that helps you, but maybe you don't have anyone to talk to in that moment, maybe writing it down can help in a similar way, because you're processing it through words. Other people like to just listen to music and kind of tune into that. My partner likes to play video games, which is also a way that we have expanded our community and our support system, because we've met a lot of people through playing games and streaming games together over the past couple of years. So my partner has some really close friends now, online friends, that they met through gaming. And before starting to stream and play games online with people, my partner didn't understand how I could have people who I considered friends, people who I talked to on a daily or even weekly basis, who I had met through the internet, because it just wasn't an experience that my partner had had before. But of course, I've been on the internet for a decade, so I have a lot of people who I talk to on a fairly regular basis who I've never met in person. You're just people that I know online. And so for me, it could be sometimes it's the Pagan Perspective team. Honestly, sometimes I've gone to the team and said, like, I'm having a really hard time with this. I don't know what to do. And so, like, different people on the collab team over the years, and I have had different levels of relationships of how often we talk and how often we're there to support each other just through conversation. Because sometimes that's all we can do. Other times, maybe, you know, if you're in a situation where it's like a family member or a close friend and you want to send a care package to them. I've had friends of mine send me little care packages when they know I'm going through a tough time. And so it depends on the person and your relationship with them, what you might be able to do to help. But for me, the isolation and loneliness feeling is ultimately helped by having people to talk to. And I'm very lucky that technology helps us in that way as well. Technology has, you know, some downsides to it sometimes too, for sure. But it is also very helpful. And so that's been the biggest thing for me. And if you are here watching this video, you also have at least sometimes access to YouTube videos. And I know a lot of people, when quarantine began, a lot of people wanted to ramp up their content creation because they knew that more people would be sitting at home and they would want more content. They would want more stuff to look at, interact with, engage with. Other people, like me, kind of got a little overwhelmed, and we've actually been creating a little less content than normal because it's just a lot going on, you know? But there's also a ton of content already here to interact with, and I've been very present interacting with people on other social medias, mostly my Instagram. I post a lot of stuff there daily, even when I'm not making videos on my channel. But yeah, for me, it just comes down to having people to talk to as far as isolation and loneliness goes. Checking in with my mom every so often, because my mom doesn't live here, you know. But even more so, just the, you know, day-to-day being able to chat with people about just daily life stuff. So I don't really have like magical solutions for isolation and loneliness. For me, it's mostly, you know, the magic of technology and having magical community specifically, because it has been really helpful as well. You know, I can talk to my mom about certain things, but it is really helpful to have people I can speak to who are also following a similar spiritual path to me, so that we can talk about those things. You know, like I said, I have neighbors, they're right over there, but they don't know I'm a witch, and I don't know how they feel about that kind of stuff yet. It hasn't really come up. I only just recently slid the topic into conversation that I read tarot cards, and that reaction was okay. So, you know, kind of like testing the waters. But, you know, there are people that I could go talk to. We can talk across the fence, still socially distanced, but I can't talk to them about everything in my life, you know? So having magical community is definitely a big thing for me. But I can't say that I personally have done any practices that have anything to do with easing my feelings of loneliness or isolation. Those have all been very direct, like, I need to talk to people kind of things. For me, the magical practices, the spiritual practices, that comes in with the feelings of stress and anxiety and things like that. So I have, you know, I've been doing spell work along with other people and like community rituals or collective magic rituals to support the Black Lives Matter movement. Hello, very loud birdies. What are you doing out there? To support the Black Lives Matter movement, to support protesters, people who are actually out there doing the thing, and similar things like that can be done to support anyone who we feel needs the extra support. And we can also do that for ourselves. So there are practices such as some people who are in my Patreon community, patreon.com/cutewitch772, which supports the videos that I do personally on my channel, and also sometimes the ones that I do here. I pepper them in there, I link them, so my patrons always have kind of a little recap of the videos that I've done throughout the month or the past couple of months whenever I get around to posting them. Sometimes it's a bit late. I have a book club currently ongoing with some of them. We are reading and discussing Starhawk's book, The Spiral Dance, together, and one of the really basic practices in that book is something called saltwater purification, which there are other versions of this practice that exist. They are not all exactly the same, but it's just the general concept of using water, and in this case, a little bit of salt in the water, earth and water, to focus, imagine putting all of our stresses and anxieties and whatever we interpret as negative emotions that we don't want, imagining them going into this water and being cleansed and purified by the salt in the water, the salt kind of absorbing it and neutralizing it, and transforming that into a purifying substance that we then drink a little bit of or all of, depending on maybe how much salt you put into it and how much you can stand to actually drink that. There are also versions that just use water with no salt. And you can do it with any beverage, really. You can charge any beverage or bless your food and charge your food with an intention that you then take in when you consume the food or beverage. So it doesn't have to be water, it doesn't have to be salt water. I do find that typically I think it works better with hot beverages, or if it's hot at the time, because the reasoning in my mind is like things like salt and sugar and syrups and things like that dissolve more easily in hot liquid, and so you can sort of immediately see it, spread throughout, as opposed to if you try putting like granulated sugar in an iced beverage or a cold beverage, it takes a lot longer for that to dissolve and spread throughout it. So to me, that makes me think that in a hot beverage, the energy, because it moves more quickly, it dissolves into that more quickly, and so any charged energy that I'm putting into it is moving more quickly and then would be absorbed by my body more quickly. That is just my way of thinking of it. But you can do it with cold beverages as well, and I have. So I like charging food and beverages. I think it's actually easiest and sort of quickest for me with beverages because I almost always have at least a bottle of water handy. And yeah, there are lots of different practices that revolve around that type of thing. So charging something with a feeling of calm, or doing the practice where you allow yourself to feel the anxieties and things and imagine that you are, sometimes I even breathe it into the thing. Imagine that you are breathing it out, blowing it out into the beverage, just getting it out of your body. Sometimes verbalizing, get this feeling of anxiety out. I'm done feeling anxious. I don't want to feel this way anymore, but I'm feeling it right now. Like allowing yourself to feel it. In theater, we do, physical warm-ups and vocal warm-ups before rehearsal or before going out on stage, one of which we call shaking out, which literally involves shaking out your arms and legs and your head and everything like that. So you can be doing something physical like that. Again, if you have the physical ability to do so, it's an option. It's not something that everyone has to do. It's not something that everyone is able to do. But even if you could just do your hands or just your neck, whatever works for you, as a way of sort of releasing the physical tension that comes with that emotional tension and mental tension, I find that helps as well. So there are relaxation techniques. I like to just go walk around in my backyard, even if to other people it looks like pacing, but to me it's also the equivalent of like a walking meditation, or just sometimes if I'm really feeling a lot of like pent up anger type feelings or just a lot of frustration, I'll stomp on the ground, imagining that as I am doing so, that energy is being directly grounded into the earth. Like, I can't take this extra frustration and stress in my body. Mother Earth, take it from me, please. Like, you know what to do with it. Take it, transform it, get it out of my body, kind of thing. So there are lots of things that I do for relaxation, physical and otherwise, getting rid of stress, helping me cope with anxiety, that could be termed spiritual practices. Sometimes it's doing a spell, lighting a candle, doing a ritual kind of thing. Other times it's yelling and stomping and shaking out my hands, or breathing into a glass of water and then holding it up to the 4 directions and then drinking it and pouring the rest on the ground if it is safe to do so. If it's just plain water, that's safe. If it's salt water, you want to be careful where you're dumping it. You don't necessarily want to be dumping it on plants, because depending on the salt concentration, that can be really bad for them. So I do like to use plain water a lot of the time when I have, such as I mentioned recently, we are reading The Spiral Dance together. So when I did the salt water purification from that book, just to sort of remind myself, because it's been a while since I've done it exactly that way, I wanted to do it exactly the way that it says in the book and sort of remind myself what that's like. I poured the water down the storm drain because that felt better to me than pouring it on the grass or even just on my driveway where it would then seep into the grass. So I poured the remainder of it down the storm drain after I took 3 sips of it. The number 3 is just significant magically to me, so I do things 3 times or 5 times or 7 times. I like odd numbers. My mom likes even numbers, so my mom would do something 4 times. And if you're doing it 3 times, you might think of the 3 realms, land, sky, and sea, or any other number of Trinity type things. If you're doing something 4 times, you might think of the 4 elements, the 4 directions, whatever, the 4 seasons, whatever to you has a significant match with that number that you like to use. I've done it both ways. I've done certain things with 3 sips. I've also done versions of a water purification type of thing where it says to use 4 breaths. And to me, the first thing I think of with 4 is the elements or the seasons. So I think of it that way. Whatever, ultimately, of course, whatever works for you. But if it's something that you haven't explored any of those things, I would definitely start with something like a shakeout if that's a physically able thing for you to do. Otherwise, yeah, I like things that involve charging plain water with your intention and then drinking it. And you can do a whole lot of different variations of things with that. So hopefully that's like basic enough that most people can come up with something out of that that feels like it would be helpful. So that's what I do for stress in general, etc. And then, taking some time to read a book and relax before I go to sleep. Or, there's all sorts of, again, what we might call mundane things that we do to calm ourselves, to help ourselves feel more like ourselves, and at least temporarily leave behind any other worries and things that might, for example, prevent us from getting to sleep. I've been suffering with insomnia for years now, so that's definitely a concern of mine. If there is something that is really stressful, and I know it's not going to go away right away, my focus might just be calming myself down right before bed by enjoying a nice book for a little bit or whatever, so that I can sleep, and then I can always worry about the thing again the next day when I wake up, because I have anxiety, so chances are I'm going to be worrying about something again the next day when I wake up. So just trying to find times to spend on ourselves, kind of coming back to center, coming back to a place that is grounded, that is a nice starting point for us. The place from which we can then move in any direction that we're going to need to go, depending on what comes at us next, what life throws at us next. We have to have that nice, comfortable, balanced position in order to be able to, not be completely blown or pushed off course, but also to be able to easily move in whatever direction we need to deal with what's going on. I hope that helps in any way, shape, or form. If anything, I hope that it at least helps to listen to someone talk about something for half an hour. I know for me, sometimes that's helpful. I just put on a podcast or put on a friend's video and listen to them talk about a book they've been reading for like 20 minutes while I wash the dishes or sweep the floor or whatever else I have to do to kind of just let myself think about something else for 20 minutes. It doesn't mean that the problem's going to go away in those 20 minutes, but it means that I'm giving myself a little break, which is necessary to then be able to jump back in and keep doing the work and to sustain being able to do the work that is necessary, because we can't necessarily do it non-stop. We have to have those rest moments. We have to have those little breaks, not because we're never going to do it again, not because we're never going to deal with the problem again, but because without that rest, we have a lot of trouble continuing in an effective way. So, if anything, I hope you enjoyed listening to this video or watching it, whatever you're doing. I hope that everyone has people that you feel like you can talk to, or even if not talk to, I hope that you feel like you can maybe post on your own social media and at least a few people will see it, and just getting it out there will have helped you feel a little bit better, like you've gotten something off your chest or out of your brain just for a second, even if you write it down in a journal and no one else ever sees it. So I hope that maybe a couple ideas in this might help anyone, and if not, I hope that there are some ideas from the rest of the team this week that help you out. If nothing I said helps, I hope that someone else has something to say that resonates more with you. So thank you very much for watching and or listening. I will see you next time, and until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.